Ladies and gentlemen, sit down and shut up. It's time for a show. So grab your chair and sit down.
If I had to pick one year for being the best year in video gaming history, it might be 1996. Games like Pokemon, Tomb Raider, Resident Evil, Duke Nukem, Diablo, Crash Bandicoot, Super Mario RPG, but most importantly, for the sake of this video, the N64, and along with it, Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, Shadows of the Empire, Pilot Wings. At the time, this looked amazing. Historically, this dive into the 3D era was a very important step forward in gaming. However, today, this looks like hot trash. And a lot of these games play like hot trash. And good luck trying to play your N64 on a modern TV. If you do manage to plug in those composite cables, you're gonna have a dark, blurry image. Luckily, the guys over at Eon have taken the technology that they put into their GameCube HDMI adapter and adopted it for the N64. It's called the Super 64, and in my opinion, this is the best way to get the best image out of your 23-year-old console. I'll warn you right now at the top before we go any further, upscaling your retro consoles isn't cheap. You can make it cheap if you don't care about how the image looks, if you don't care about the input lag, if you don't care about stretching the image, if you don't care about how it looks. If you just want to play your N64 on a modern TV, you can get a cheap HDMI upscaler and call it a day. But if you want those nice, sharp, crisp, hard pixels out of your retro console, you're gonna have to spend a little bit of extra money. My favorite thing about this device is that it's plug and play. There's basically no settings. You just plug it in and it works exactly how you want it to. The GCHD had an IR sensor and you could hook up a remote control to access the settings, and it was a whole lot. The Eon Super 64 just works. It's lagless, just like the GCHD was. So there's no additional lag added from upscaling. It pulls the S-video feed directly from the N64 itself and scales it up to 480p. It also tunes the colors and audio so no quality is lost. For some reason, my capture card washes the picture out a little bit. I'm adding some color back into it in post, but on the TV and even in the capture window, I'm seeing nice, crisp, saturated colors where they should be. These Elgato capture cards aren't really meant for capturing anything less than 720p anyway. The Super 64 also forces a 4:3 aspect ratio. If you want the image stretched, you probably shouldn't be using this thing anyway. Or just set your TV to stretch the image. But look at how nice and sharp those pixels are. Since this is an early 3D console, those hard pixels might not be exactly what you're looking for. You might want smooth polygons. And if that's the case, just press the one button that's on the side of the Super 64 to enable slick mode. It does a really good job of smoothing out those pixels. Most people prefer this mode, and I understand why, but I've got to be honest, I'm more of a fan of the crisp pixel look. The N64 era was already pretty ugly. No sense in polishing a turd here. Now, at least some of the comments are going to talk about emulation. Emulated N64 games can look pretty great. If you want insanely smooth polygons, that's the way to go, because the polygons are being rendered at whatever resolution your computer screen is. However, developers back then used really low resolution images for some flat assets and textures. So the HUD in most of these games are going to look like and there's nothing you can do about it. Besides, download a fan-made asset pack for every single game you want to play, and I'm not about that life. The Eon Super 64 takes the native resolution of the N64 and upscales the entire image to 480p. That means those pixelated assets will just have their pixels enlarged. You won't have to worry about them being all blurry and gross. Or again, you can enable slick mode if you want the Super 64 to try to smooth it out. Most games on the N64 only run at 320 by 240, so the Super 64 is actively upscaling the image. Some games that support the expansion pack can run at a native 480i. Those include games like Excitebike, FIFA 99, Hybrid Heaven, Pokemon Stadium 2, Resident Evil 2, Shadow Man, and Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, which isn't called Pod Racer. That's some Mandela effect. I have a few of these to test out, and they do look significantly better. In Episode 1 Racer, you can actually switch between high-res and low-res mode in the game settings. I'd say Episode 1 Racer definitely benefits the most from improved graphics. Resident Evil 2 has great-looking character models, but the background textures are still terrible. Slick mode doesn't help much either. Excitebike looks pretty good, and Slick mode actually does a pretty good job smoothing out those polygons. Hybrid Heaven has a few different settings. Increasing the resolution destroys the frame rate. Letterboxing is a happy medium, but on today's TVs, the image is now window boxed. It's kind of silly looking. I've also just learned that most N64 games only run at 30 frames per second. The expansion pack can increase the frame rate of some games, like for example Episode 1 Racer, but my capture card refused to capture it at any more than 30 frames per second. My guess is that it was an unstable frame rate. Even though it looked pretty stable to me, it was definitely running at somewhere close to 60. It looked really good on my TV. What I'm trying to say is if you want to play Episode 1 Racer, definitely make sure you're playing it with an expansion pack because it looks way better that way. Of course, the Super 64 isn't the only way to upscale your N64 gameplay. There's also the Ultra HDMI mod. I don't know about you, but I don't want to do that. It requires soldering a ribbon cable to the board of your N64 and installing an additional chip that upscales the image. You also have to punch an HDMI port-sized hole in the back of your N64. The upside is that this gives you a full 1080p image. The downside is that it's $165, and you still have to do all of the work yourself. The Super 64 is $150, but all you have to do is plug it in. But why stop at 480p if we don't have to? I recently got this here Framemeister just for occasions like this. But will it work with the Super 64? I don't know because I filmed this before I even tried it. So let's ask Future Bob if it works. Does it? Okay, so actually, yes, this thing does do a really good job of upscaling the Super 64. I'm actually very excited about this because this is the first time I've ever gotten the Framemeister to work correctly with any device. I kind of wish that I've been using the Framemeister the whole time for all of this footage. Right now, my Elgato's reading a clean 1080p 60 frames per second, which is weird because that's not what Mario 64 is. But Episode 1 Racer is, and the colors being picked up by my Elgato are exactly as they should be. Do you need a Framemeister with your Super 64 purchase? Hell no. This is just a weird flex. Because I bought this and I wanted to use it, and you know what? It looks great, but this is just because I had it. Fucking thing's $400. You don't wanna do that to yourself. Also, past Bob, while you have me here, there are some other things I wanted to mention. Like for example, I figured out this thing works for the GameCube also because it's the same sort of technology that's in the GCHD. It seems to also work with the GameCube. Even though the Super 64 is fine-tuned for the N64, it works surprisingly well on the GameCube. The colors aren't as nice and the signal isn't as clean. The newer GCHD Mark II actually uses the digital output of the GameCube, so the signal will be cleaner. But this thing might be able to play double duty for you if you wanted it to. I suspect that the Super 64 will also work with the SNES because it's the same sort of cable. However, it doesn't fit on the SNES because of this big piece of plastic blocking the way. You could probably take apart your SNES and plug it in without the case. I don't want to do that, so you could go nuts. Also, it's worth mentioning there's a Hyperkin cable that's a much cheaper alternative. It works on the N64, the Super Nintendo, and the GameCube because it's all the same port. Obviously, it's not going to pull the same sort of quality out of your N64. I tried to get one for this video, but it was back ordered on every website that I looked at, even the Hyperkin website itself. They said it would take a couple of weeks, and I didn't have a couple of weeks. I had like one. Also, Hyperkin's working on their own version of an N64 called the Ultra 64. Right now, it's software emulation, but that could change, and it's going to be 720p. We talked about it a little bit in our E3 video. That's worth keeping an eye out for if maybe this is a little too expensive for you. But again, that's not going to be original hardware. It's not going to be pulling the same quality out of the HDMI port. Also, I learned that later models of the N64 have better S-video encoding. So if you have a later model of an N64, it'll work better with the Super 64. My N64 is one of the later model ones, so your mileage may vary. There's a handy chart that I'll show on screen right here, and I'll link it in the description unless I forget. Basically, if your N64 has a serial number that starts with NS205 or higher, then you're probably good. Motherboards labeled CPU 3 and 4 have the quote bad S video. You're looking for a CPU 5 and up. All right, my knee hurts and I gotta go finish this video. All right, goodbye. I feel like I should also mention the controller I've been using throughout this video. This is the Retro Fighter Brawler 64 controller. I love it. The original N64 controller is an abomination. This controller makes it a little easier to play these games in today's modern era. Some games that use the C buttons as actual buttons still take a little getting used to, like Star Fox and Mega Man 64, but it's still way better than using an actual N64 controller. And the thumbstick doesn't wobble around a bunch. So if you want the best out of your N64, maybe you frequently have a bunch of friends over to play Mario Kart. Maybe Mario 64 is your go-to game to unwind. Maybe you just have this sick obsession with getting all of your retro consoles to look great on your brand new TV. Then check out the Super 64. If you could care less about playing your retro consoles in high definition, then how did you possibly make it all the way through this video? So what do you guys think about the Super 64 and getting your N64 gameplay at the highest resolution possible? Is this something that you'd be interested in? Is this too much for you? Leave it in the comments below. Add me on Twitter and all this other social media garbage. Also, if this thing fell in your lap tomorrow, what's the first game that you would try with it? Mine was Mario 64, of course. Of course it was. Anyway, we got new videos and live streams all the time. Our schedule is usually in the pinned tweet over on our Twitter. We got Wulff Den live every single Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time here on YouTube. And we got Twitch streams over on twitch.tv/WulffDen where I'm playing the hell out of Mario Maker. Why? It's my favorite game ever, and I can never remember the name. And if you support us here on YouTube, we're over on twitch.tv/WulffDen. If you have Amazon Prime, you can get Twitch Prime, and it's completely free to you. You can get access to our supporter-only Discord where we post videos like this a little bit early. You get private chat time with us, and you get to play multiplayer games with us once a month. But of course, the most important thing that you can do to help support the channel is just subscribe to it and share this video with a friend that you would want to play some N64 games with in beautiful HD. Maybe you can get them to buy it. Thank you guys very much. You have yourself a very good week.